Good morning.
Morning.
So we got invited here to come talk about Rails Girls, but I realize it's actually pretty hard to talk about Rails Girls without talking about Ruby. Ruby has been at the cornerstone of the kind of philosophies and principles for the growth of the Rails Girls community, and this is kind of the story that we want to tell you here today. The story that we have is split into 4 distinct acts. And the first character I want to introduce in this story is my dear friend Linda. We've known each other for a few years now, and we've become pretty good friends. And she's now an author of children's books. And this has been something we've talked about for a long time, so I'm super happy that she's now actually working on this. If you haven't heard of this, she has this Kickstarter project she started, I think earlier this year, called Hello Ruby, and it's this children's book about teaching kids about programming and introducing them to various concepts and things, and it's about this story of this red-headed girl, Ruby, as she goes on her ventures with various iconic figures and animals and avatars in the programming world and computer world. So I've actually been to Helsinki, Finland, and this is where Linda comes from. She invited me to come over, and I was going through all my photos trying to actually find a photo that people would recognize that was from Finland, and the closest thing I could find was this Angry Bird thing, because I think that's the only thing people probably recognize that's from Finland. And this is a thing called Linda&, and this came out of the Railsbury conference, and you basically make this like heart-shaped shape with your hand, and there has to be this like weird obscure thing that pops up in the left-hand side in the picture. And since this picture has come out, we still have not figured out what this squirrel-looking thing that's to the left of her head is. So it's still one of those like, how many licks does it take to get the center of a Tootsie Roll? Like, never will figure this thing out.
And the hero of this story is Terence Lee over here. Terence, the Friday Hug superhero. And as said, I've come to know Terence for a few years now, and all of you have probably used software that he writes because he's worked on Bundler, he's worked on Rescue, and he's currently the Ruby task force of Heroku. But in addition to that, he's also an amazing, amazing friend who writes these long, long, long letters to everyone he knows, and is like the resident Friday Hug person, and we'll get to that later on. So as with any good story, this story starts with the first act, and it starts from the very, very beginning, the genesis of Rails Girls and how it was born. I'm not a programmer, so I was learning programming 4 years ago by the very scratch, and I wanted to have a community for myself to learn programming in a friendly and fun environment, and this was just something that I wanted to do for me and my friends. And I have here a screenshot of the first Ruby on Rails Workshop for Girls event in Helsinki in 2010. And this was me and 25 of my good friends and the good guys from Kisco Labs. And we just decided to do a weekend event for ourselves to teach the very basics of programming. And it was a super fun weekend. We all learned tons. I learned Rails for the first time almost at that point. And we never ever thought that it would become something as big as it is nowadays. However, we did put the event on Twitter, and there on the left-hand side you can see David Heinemeier Hansen tweeting that Rails for Girls did as you can see, the name was even different at the time. So Rails for Girls did a workshop for 24 women in Helsinki a few weeks back. Great initiative, they're looking to do more. And I remember I printed out this tweet and put it on my wall at home, and I was like, like so excited and happy, and I could never ever have imagined how amazing the Ruby community has been after this. So a few months passed, and a guy from Singapore emails me and Karri, the other co-founder of Rails Girls, and says that, hey, we should do this in Singapore. And at that point, I had never thought that this could be something that would become a global thing, but I had never been also to Singapore, so I figured, like, sure, let's go to Singapore. And Here you can see a picture from the first event in Singapore, and this was the first time that I realized that, hey, we've actually created something that other people outside of Finland, outside of Helsinki, and outside of my little circle of friends find exciting and fun. I think there's a few things that really influenced the first workshops and the way they turned out. The first thing is my home country, Helsinki, Finland. And I don't know how many of you know about Scandinavia, but a really, really unproportionate amount of the open source technology of the world comes from these few little countries. So Finland is 5 million people, and we are the country behind Linus, or Linus Torvalds. We generated him, no, but he is the guy who wrote Linux and Git. MySQL comes from Finland. SSH comes from Finland, unfortunately, in the light of the recent events. SSH, IRC, so much of the backbone is built in Finland, and I think the thing that influenced us here is that it was always super evident for us that Rails Girls would be an open source community thing. It would be something that is built for everyone and that it should be free of charge. And the second thing that really influenced me was excitement. As I said, I'm not a programmer, but I was always super excited about technology. And when I was 12 years old, or I think 13 years old, I was super madly in love with Al Gore. This was 2001, and he was the Vice President of the United States. And I built this website that you guys see over here. It has nice little iframes and color differences. And I was so proud and excited to be showing something that I had created myself. And I wanted to show other women the same kind of excitement and happiness that I felt when I first realized that I can actually build something that is available for the rest of the world to see. And I didn't know it at the time when we were doing the first Rails Girls event, but this is something that is at the very core of the Ruby language as well. This is a quote from Mats saying, "Man is driven to create. I know I really love to create things, and while I'm not good at painting, drawing, or music, I can write software." And this has been sort of the overrunning idea behind Rails Girls ever since. So after Singapore, we did a few small events, and I was starting to feel really overwhelmed because I was micromanaging everything, and I felt that I would need to be in every single event, like making sure that everything happens. And we were kind of like planning this big event in Berlin, and it was the biggest event we've had thus far. It was 75 attendees, and there was a lot of things that needed to happen for that. And it's a very, very important event for another reason too, because that's the event where I met Terence.
Yeah, so there's actually a story of how I got to Berlin. So I was on my way, like I knew I was going to Europe to go to Railsbury for Krakow. And a good friend of mine, Josh Calderemus, one of the founders of Travis CI, said I had to stop in Berlin on my way over. So I made last minute changes to my trip and made sure to fly in for this weekend to go into Berlin before stopping over to Railsbury. And I was kind of freaking out, like traveling international country. This is before I actually started really traveling at all before. And, you know, foreign country, didn't know if they spoke English at all. And he gave me these instructions on how to meet up with him. And he told me I need to take this like train, bus, something to leave the airport to get to the Bahn. And from the Bahn, I would eventually make my way to like Prinsenstraat. And then from there, I could walk to their office. And then when I got to the Beta House, which is where their office is located, I could give him a call, and then he would come pick me up. And then I proceeded to tell him that I'm an American that uses a CDMA phone, and it's not global, and I couldn't actually call him. And he was like, well, I guess that's cool. You're a pretty smart guy. I'm sure you can figure out how to get to the top floor. So after traveling all day to Berlin and like finding my way to the office, it takes me about like 30 minutes to realize there's like an elevator in the back that you can ride to the top, and I kind of wish you just told me to take the elevator, but it's Josh, so go figure. And so I finally make it to the top, and then I open the elevator doors open, you walk into the office, and basically you see like all these girls in their office, and I have no idea what is going on or what is even happening. And I run to Josh, and he's like, hey bro, just drop your suitcases off in the corner office there, and then you should go and help some of these girls install Rails. And that was kind of my first foray into Rails Girls, and then I proceeded into helping girls install Rails, and then the next day was the actual Rails Girls event. And this is actually a picture of Linda assigning me to a Rails Girls group.
Look at my determined face. I'm
Yeah.
determined to make this guy work.
And the original plan that Josh had with me was like, oh, you should just come hang out during the day, and then during the rest of the afternoon, you can go off and like kind of explore the rest of Berlin. I've never actually been to Berlin before, so I was looking forward to actually like walking around. I hear they have nice museums and stuff. There's like that Berlin Wall thing. And, you know, luck being the way it is, Saturday, which was the day of the Rails Girls event, was actually the only sunny day that I was in Berlin, but I ended up just coaching these Rails Girls attendees, but I don't really have any regrets from doing that, but it was, you know, makes a nice story. So after coaching my first event, one of the things that I took away that I realized was that the women who were attending this event were very excited to be there. And I've taught people, not Rails Girls, but like people in America before for various things about programming and stuff. And one of the things that really bugs me is just how apathetic they are about it. You know, you're taking your time teaching these people, and they just don't really care that you're there. And that was something that was really different about this Rails Girls event, was that it was a super nice Saturday, like sunny outside, and here they were, these girls who were more than happy to sit there, and they wanted to learn, and they were listening to things you said, they asked questions, and they were just very attentive. And even though at the end of the day you were super drained from like working with them and teaching, you just felt happy, and like there was just this positive energy from the event itself. So after Berlin, we made our way to Railsbury in Krakow, and this is a picture of Kari, the other co-founder of Rails Girls, at the Applecake offices hosting the Rails Girls event there. They were also the hosts of the Railsbury conference. And one of the things that, having met Kari and Linda, they were talking to me in Berlin a little bit, and I grabbed dinner with them. And they kept talking to me about these like guides that they wanted to open source for, they're like, we've been wanting to do this for like months, open source these guides. And they were these like HTML files that were these static files that they had up, and they, you know, kept talking about wanting to open source them. And so me and Kari, after dinner that night that we got in, the day before the conference, sat down with also another Finnish person, Vesa, who is part of Kisco Labs. We sat down and distributed the rest of the guides and converted them to Markdown and put them on GitHub. And I remember staying up till 3 in the morning and then sending Linda an email and being like, hey, it's done. Like, now the guides are online and like open sourced, and like people can start using them now.
And the next day, I gave my first ever speech about Rails Girls for the programming community, and I was so nervous. I was almost vomiting before the talk, and I felt like, okay, they're going to hate me because you can't talk about women in technology without being like somehow disliked or just there was so much like angst and unhappiness around the whole subject. And I gave this talk that you can still find on YouTube called What Every Girl Should Know About Programming. And imagine my relief when all of the people I appreciated in the Ruby community and I felt indebted to because they had created all of this stuff that I used every single day, they gave a standing ovation to me. So they stood up and clapped their hands and said, yes, this is what we've been waiting for, and this is what we want to do. And from that date onwards, the Rails Girls events have spread all over the world, and there's been events in so many cities, and yeah, Terence has been to many of them.
Yeah, so I think at this point I've been to 10 or more Rails Girls events as either a coach or an organizer. I've actually helped organize events in cities that I don't live in, basically, and then also attended them. And it's been super convenient because oftentimes they'll attach a Rails Girls event to a conference. So I hear there's actually one going on tomorrow. And things that amazed me about it was like, it was super easy to get involved, and you know, they were super welcoming of speakers that were traveling to go do this stuff. And it was great to kind of share experiences from event to event, since I've been to a bunch of them in the past, and kind of share that with the organizers or the various coaches. In addition, also just seeing how different but also the same they were, like seeing the common threads, but also how each event felt uniquely different.
So the second act of this story is going to focus more on the practices, and this is going to be a story about how Rails Girls grew to be what it is today, a global grassroots movement to get more women excited about technology. And this quote over here is kind of an overarching theme here. So I believe that the purpose of life is at least in part to be happy. Based on this belief, Ruby is designed to make programming not only easy but also fun. It allows you to concentrate on the creative side of programming with less stress. And kind of the not only easy but fun has been a part that has been overarching for our philosophy around Rails Girls. In Rails Girls speech, we would say, love to make is for Rails Girls, and Rubies are for Rails Girls, and experiment is for Rails Girls, and say all of these things that kind of mirror the sentiment that Mats had before. So Rails Girls is an approachable event for women of all age, all backgrounds, but not only women, but also men. Because Karri, as you saw earlier, is not a girl, he's a guy. We wanted to make something that is approachable and fun for everyone, and we felt that this shouldn't be a girls-only event, but this should be something that is welcoming and fun for everyone. A community for like-minded people.
In addition to making it approachable to attendees that wanted to learn about Rails and bring them into the fold, we also, I think another key point was to make it approachable for existing people in the Ruby community to want to help out and be involved. I think one of the reasons it has been so successful around the world has been that it's been so easy and people have wanted to be involved. We usually have so many coaches who want to be part of it that we have to turn them away. Oftentimes when I've assisted around the world, I've been a floating coach. Like I actually haven't taken on a group. I think after Amsterdam, it was that like we preferred that there was local coaches. I didn't want to rob them of that experience since I've done it a bunch of times in the past. And it's been super great that even people who've done a lot in the Ruby community, like Konstantin or Sven in Berlin, like they're more than happy to take the time and help out and like be really active about being a part of Rails Girls. And one of the things that makes Rails Girls such a great thing is that it is about the people, that we focus so much about these one-on-one interactions with the people involved with the event and making it so everyone does feel welcome. So one of the things that we try to do is that we have a coaches dinner usually the night before the event. And similar to a lot of conferences, you'll have a speakers dinner to kind of thank the speakers for taking the time to come out and speak at your event to make it a great event. And since Rails Girls is a nonprofit, we don't really have a way to fund or pay for a lot of the coaches who are coming to the event. So whether they're coming as part of a conference and they have to pay for an extra day like to stay to be part of that event, or they're local, like we can't really compensate or pay for a hotel or those flights or anything. So the least we can do usually, depending on funding, is to kind of host this like small key coaches dinner. And I think like the first thing that you did was like you made food yourself.
Yeah, we made tomato soup because that was the cheapest thing that we could do that would still feel healthy and good.
Yeah, so it doesn't really have to be necessarily like a high key thing, but just like a way to express your thanks to the people who are involved with the event and taking their time out on like a beautiful Saturday, for instance. The other thing we try to do during the coaches dinner is also just like give the lay of the land. A lot of these coaches have never really taught before, and kind of just like make them feel okay about teaching like a bunch of bright-eyed starred students the next day, and let them know that at the end of the day, like I think they're just excited to be there, so you can't really mess up too much. So besides the coaches dinner, the other kind of event that we have related to Rails Girls is depending on budgeting, we try to do an after party as well. And one of the key components of this is trying to bridge like the two communities together. So you have these like attendees who aren't necessarily involved in the tech community, and you have like all these Rubyists. And oftentimes like you'll be busy with the coaching and other things, and talking to them, it allows you to kind of build like a more personal relationship and like feel more welcome to go out to like your local like Ruby meetup or what have you after the Rails Girls event. So this allows you to kind of talk in a more relaxed atmosphere, talk about not Ruby stuff, like what you do, and realize that pretty much all the Rubyists that I've met are actually really nice and friendly and really welcoming, and are more than happy to have them come to like your local Ruby events and make that a part of their like regular routine. We also usually we have to reject attendees because there's so many that apply. we also try to invite them to the after party so they can also get a sense. Even though we didn't have space for them at the original venue, oftentimes we'll have space at like the pub or bar or wherever it's hosted at. Also for Rubyists that are local, we will also invite people who potentially were busy during the day and couldn't make it, or we had to turn them away because we had too many coaches. But really just trying to create that community feel there.
And one of the things that we really stress is, even though we have seen super successful Rails Girls chapters, like cities that have so many, like Taipei, for instance, have so many events, the end goal of Rails Girls is not to create a vibrant Rails Girls ecosystem. It is to create a more diverse Ruby ecosystem. And making the participants a part of the Ruby ecosystem is the first and foremost goal of all of these events, not itself running Rails Girls events.
So how many of you have ever been so frustrated that you've wanted to give up on something, like whether you're debugging a problem, you're just like flip the table, like I don't really want to work on this anymore?
Yes, no, yes.
I guess only like 10 people maybe,
wow,
and Linda.
lucky.
Man, you guys must be super awesome at programming. I know I've personally been run into this problem before, and I think it's like really a big problem for, especially for new people. Like, you know, you're learning to program, there's a lot of stuff to learn, and if you don't really have help and know where to go, like it's super easy to just be like, okay, I'm gonna give up. Like I'm just gonna stop because I don't know how to proceed and I don't know where to go.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah, like I've definitely done this while trying to learn like new programming languages, for instance. Like I don't know the resources, I don't know the community, I don't know how to proceed. So being aware of this, like one of the things that we encourage a lot in kind of design into the curriculum is trying to teach the attendees how to Google for answers. I know that sounds kind of terrible because you might like end up on Stack Overflow and just like copy paste something, but I think the underlying value of having the attendee like learn how to become a little more self-sufficient. So after the workshop, when they do go back to their house and they want to continue programming, they don't, every time they run into a problem, they don't have to find someone and ask for help or get stuck and basically stop. Another part of this is also like we require people to bring their laptops to the events, and then we set up Ruby and Rails on their machines. And the reason we do this is because we want them to be able to be productive when they leave the event again. And installing Ruby on Rails is actually really, really hard. It's gotten a lot better over the last few years since I started being a part of Rails Girls, but it's still not necessarily the easiest process. Like on Windows, you have Rails installer, and I know sometimes you just like double click the thing and you run into an error, and the actual solution is just to like double click the thing again and it will finish reinstalling. But like as a new person, like how are you supposed to know that? Or like if you're using like RVM or RBM, like you have to learn about compilers and all this stuff, and you know there's like all these scripts and things now, like hopefully you don't have to go and download Xcode. But it's like, it's a really complicated thing, and you know, we're lucky that people like Yehuda just released Takedo 1.0, I think, at RailsConf. So that's kind of awesome to help like make progress on this. But it's hard, and like a lot of people will get stuck before even getting to like learning about programming. Like setting up Ruby is hard. Like I'm not even getting to the part where I'm learning about how to actually program Ruby. So any way we can kind of cut that back and make people more productive, I think, is super important to the core curriculum.
One thing I ran into when I was learning programming was just the sheer amount of information available and sort of the overload of all information. And I tried to understand what are databases, what are servers, what is infrastructure, what are all these different things. And it's sometimes very hard to forget the big picture. And we always tell the coaches that you should focus on the big picture. Don't explain everything about a server. Explain just in general what a server does. And I want to teach especially the people to be more confident with the lingo or language of the web by teaching them what pull requests are, what is CSS, what is HTML, what is Agile. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the exercise we do at RailsConf, which is called the bento box. And it's especially designed for people who have to hear about technological terms all day long, like what is ABS, ROR, Technology is full of these abbreviations, and I'll run really quickly through what we do in the bento box exercise. So bento is a Japanese lunchbox thing that is beautiful and balanced, and you can swap things within it, but it needs to always have certain elements. And our bento box looks like this. So there's always the style and the structure, there's always logic, there's always storage, and there's always infrastructure. And when you fill in the bento box, it looks like this. You can see that there is HTML, CSS, Ajax. JavaScript is kind of a weird one that lives there in between. You can learn that MySQL lives in the storage. But this alone doesn't really help people understand things. So what we do afterwards is we show them how real companies say these horrible, horrible things that beginners feel like, oh, I can't understand things. So Etsy, for instance, says, we use a number of different programming languages, including MATLAB, but are primarily a PHP shop. We have a number of... And for a beginner, this starts to sound like something, like a foreign language. But what Etsy really wants to say here is the next picture, which means that for the logic, they use PHP and MATLAB, and for storing information, they use MySQL and PostgreSQL. And this already gives information for the beginner that, okay, this is just a conceptual way of understanding how things fit into one another. And the next quote is from Foursquare, and it's even worse. It says, server code is written in Scala running on the Lift web framework using Jetty for a web server, and so forth. In reality, all Foursquare wants to say is this. Oh, wow, we lost the pictures there. But you get the point. Anyway, try it out. And one of the things we do also is that we don't only lecture about these different terms, we make the people actually search them up. And each girl has a bento box, and they are supposed to look up these acronyms. And most of them have never heard about what is PHP, what is Nginx, things like that before. And there's also false friends, things that have absolutely nothing to do with programming. And they learn about the Googling part that Terence talked about, and they learn about not to be afraid of technological jargon, because now they know, at least have some sort of a conceptual understanding where to put that piece. And one of my most proudest moments as a Rails Girls coach is seeing a bunch of beginners who go like, oh, Nginx is easy. It goes into the infrastructure.
Another thing that we try to do at Rails Girls is at these events is focus on doing things over just sitting there and listening to people talk about this jargon and lecture for most of the event. So there's this skeleton application that you work on as an attendee, and you go and build it, and we try to give as much time possible with the coaches to give your attendees the ability to build that and have something working at the end of the day. Pretty much at every event I've been to, every girl has been able to at least finish that application, and oftentimes they're able to do more than that and go beyond just the basic application. And I remember when I got into computer science and programming, one of the things that really pulled me in was the fact that there is that feedback loop that is like almost instantaneous. Like whether you're doing like hello world for the first time in Ruby, like seeing how simple it is, and then literally just running it on the command line and seeing it output the words hello world. We want to basically give people those magic moments to kind of pull them into programming and make them like have this amazing feeling. Because at the end of the day, we want the attendees, when they leave, to be excited about technology. We understand that at the end of the workshop, they're not going to be programmers. They're not going to be expert web developers. They're going to just be exposed in the course of one day to all these things and hopefully take the big picture items away. But like a lot of the little details, they'll remember a few things here and there, but it's going to be hard to remember everything for people who've never seen the command line before, like seeing it for the first time. Like one of the hard things I know for a lot of attendees that is super simple for a lot of programmers now is like the fact that you actually have to like save your text editor and then refresh the browser. Oftentimes, like as a coach, people will ask me, hey, like I followed the thing and like I actually don't see the changes, and almost 9 times out of 10 you go to their text editor and like, did you save the file? But like just like concepts like these are just very common, and we want people to be excited about the technology and come back and want to keep learning more and not get lost in those details.
And one like really good example of this is the conference you guys are now in, like RubyConf, the way Rails Girls alumni are here helping out. I think it's an amazing way of getting people excited and bringing them back into the Ruby community and showing them about like more about the technology industry. So the third and second to final act of our story is a little bit more philosophical. It talks about the influences. This is a quote from Rumi that says, "Speak a new language so that the world will be a new world." And the idea behind this is that languages have a grammar, they have a syntax, but they also have an inherent culture in them. And the way we use language shapes the way we see the world. And real languages, they change over time. And real languages are messy. And in the same way, I think Railsgirls has been influenced by Ruby as a programming language. And me and Terence, we thought about like, okay, what examples can we give about them? And here's a few stories that we feel like the ways that Ruby has influenced Railsgirls as a language.
So if you've looked into the history of the creation of Ruby, Matt's also often refers to himself as this amateur language designer. And I think one of the really interesting things about this is that Ruby has become this beautiful language that we're all so happy to use and be a part of this community. I mean, we have this conference here today. I just came from RubyConf like 24 hours ago, and there's like 1,600 attendees there, plus 100 speakers. Like it's this big, a big community where people spend like 40 hours a week programming in this language, and they love doing it, and they're passionate about it, and there's this diverse open source community around it. But it was created by this quote-unquote amateur language designer. And similarly, like, I think one of the things that makes Railsgirls really unique is that it was created by two non-programmers. So Kari was a designer, and Linda is this dropout business student and who wanted to learn about programming. And one of the things that came out of it was that since Kari was a designer, like, design was very important to the creation of Railsgirls, and not being a programmer, they had this view that was very unique of, I'm a student and I want to learn, and let's create a program where I am the person who's going to dog food and like experience this program because I'm the one that wants to learn about it. And I've realized that good design has made this event like even more approachable for a lot of people and has helped it become even more successful. So if we look at, this is the Railsgirls guide page. It's just like very cleanly laid out, and it's very simple. Like, you just follow these things in steps. Like, here's this top thing. If you're an organizer, like, you click this thing for how to organize a Railsgirls event. And if you're a student, you just literally, you can send them to this page and they can follow 1, 2, 3. It's like laid out, like installing Rails. Like, after I'm done with that, I can now build my web app. And then after that, like, we have this thing for putting online Heroku. I think this is actually an out-of-date screenshot. There's like a lot more guides now, but like it's a very like sequential order that like makes sense for new attendees, and they're not really intimidated by necessarily like a wall of text, which I've seen on like other like resources and tutorials online. Like, that can definitely scare people away. I know when I get a wall of text like in a certain way, I have to like force myself to read it because your mind kind of shuts down a little bit. And I know for me, like, one of the things for how I picked up Ruby was that I actually read this book called The Pickaxe that was created by Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas. And it was kind of this cornerstone in the Ruby community because it was the first really accessible documentation that was not in Japanese of the Ruby programming language. And they put a lot of work into basically documenting and reading the source code to figure out like how the Ruby programming language worked. And it was this tutorial that walked you through how to do it. And like, so you learned how to program in Ruby, and then there was this whole reference section of like the whole standard library and everything in the back. But what was important was that there was this documentation that was out that allowed it to be accessible outside of Japan, and it was super easy to consume. You just like bought this book and you read it, and it like made a lot of sense. And this allowed, and then also like in Railsgirls, we've documented how to, with the guides, like how to throw all these events around the world with literally a step-by-step, these are the things you need to do. And I think that has made it super easy for people who are interested in actually throwing events to actually go and do it. You don't have to like contact people and go through all these unclear processes of like, how do I do this stuff? It literally tells you step-by-step, here's what you need to do, here are the things that allow you to to actually throw this event, and you don't have to worry and think about missing anything that isn't there.
One of the things that for non-technical people it's always hard to understand is how can you do Rails skills without having any formal structure or any leadership or any kind of processes within the community, and the distributed way of working for programmers comes naturally, but for the rest of the world, they are still learning. So I think for Rails skills, the active mailing list has been a really important thing. So when you want to open a new chapter or start a new Rails skills city, you send an email, this templated email to the whole mailing list, and there's always a real person who welcomes you and says, hey, amazing that you're joining this community, and here's a person from your neighboring city who can help you out and mentor. Twitter has been super important for recruiting people and spreading the word, but I'd say the most important thing for creating but also maintaining the Rails skills curriculum and all of the information has been pull requests, not surprisingly.
So one of the things that was really important for us in the community with doing, making the effort to do the guides, not just put them up as static online HTML files that we could have just hosted on the existing Rails Girls infrastructure, was we wanted to create this open source culture where people could contribute and be involved and be active. And I think the thing that has made this a huge success is that even as an attendee, you can go through the workshop and you might have feedback, and you can submit simple things like typos or suggestions of oh, you should include this content, or even submit whole new guides to the thing. And it's now this living document that is evolving with the contributions of everyone in the Rails Girls community, and it's not just this thing that's kind of driven by Linda and I and the people who are kind of were part of the original Rails Girls crew of making it successful. So having this open source culture that allows it to be approachable and usable, and then they can use the lingo and languages that they learn in the course to actually make a contribution back to Rails Girls. And so another thing that I think has been super awesome about Ruby is that it has a very complete standard library. I know not everyone agrees with everything that should be in there, but one of the things that has been awesome is that having something that is having these reusable components in Ruby allows you to build a lot of things out of the box without having to download separate gems or basically now need to learn how to do all these other things. So you can connect to the internet, for example, using the HTTP straight from Ruby without having to download another library like XCon or something else. And I think this has made it nice to be able to distribute and use, because you can have stuff that's just out of the box. So being able to provide these guides in the guide, and also in addition to just having them the text of this is what you need to do, we've provided emails and other presentation materials to lower the barrier to entry. So you have all the resources there for you to actually host this thing. So the equivalent of the standard library for us would be all these other swag and things and presentations and materials. So you can go print out stickers
temporary tattoos.
Yeah. Temporary tattoos. We don't necessarily send the stickers out to you, but you can go and you have the source materials to go and get your own stickers or print your own balloons, or if you want to give a presentation about the bento box, the slides Linda has are up there, and if you want to talk about Rails Girls, all those materials are up there, and we've been slowly collating them from various people around the world as well as they've done their presentations. And one of the things I think that drew a lot of people to Ruby is that it is a flexible language. So I'm not going to read this long quote because it's a lot of words, but there's often there's more than one way to do almost anything you want to do in Ruby. And simple examples collect and map are kind of aliased. You can do blocks on a single line with curly braces, or you can do multi-line with curly braces. You can use this do-n. I know there's basically order of operation differences between these two, but oftentimes they're used fairly interchangeably. And if we compare it to another language that's fairly similar to Ruby that people often compare to, Python, Python has these PEPs, and one of the values of that community is there's this white spacing. It's very rigid. This is how you're going to design. This is how you're going to write your program. And if you don't do white spacing correctly, then you're going to get a syntax error. And like, there's basically this one true way to do everything, and if they haven't, then the council probably needs to meet at some point and like come up with some new pep on like how to do this thing. But going back to like the quotes that we read about Matt's and his creation language is that I think Ruby's there to create happiness and encourage creativity and like have you think and like explore with the language itself.
And the guides are really just the starting point for the cities. We were talking about different ways different cities have used the 2-day workshop. There's been 3-day workshops, there's been workshops with business and psychology elements in them. Here's, like, each chapter can design their own event, and when people ask me, like, can you ask the Rails Girls chapters to do something, I said, like, I don't know. Like, all of the chapters are really independent and they choose themselves. Here's a couple of pictures from the different ways that the chapters, like, even picture themselves online.
Yeah, and I know, like, one of so, like, traditionally you have, like, how we framed it in the guide is like you have this like workshop the day before, which is like the install fest, and then you have the coaches dinner, and then you kind of have the full day workshop the next day and the after party, and that's kind of how it's laid out in the guides. But there was this one event, I don't remember where.
East Europe somewhere.
Somewhere in East Europe where they had this 3 events, and like the first day there was like this psychology curriculum like as part of the event. And it was really neat to see like people really taking ownership and making it their own. And I think when you do that, like people are more excited to keep like running with it and not like just let it, die off because like you feel like it's something that is a part of what you want to be a part of. And then coaches, in addition, coaches also have this flexibility as well, and we try to encourage this. So in the curriculum, we don't tell you how to explain everything in the guide. We'll have separate sections that say, oh, like this is a good opportunity to explain what scaffolding is or what MVC or various other concepts. But you can go into as little or as much detail as you want to with your group of students, depending on the students or depending on how comfortable or your expertise there. Or you can even go and get help if you want as well. But we've also had coaches who just like scrap the curriculum and kind of go off the rails, if you will, and go and like do their own thing. Like we've had coaches who just want to teach Sinatra instead, and like
that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to follow the guide like word for word. You can do what you think is best for the students there. Oftentimes, like, we will group together students we try to group together students that have similar experiences. So there'll be like, for instance, like front-end students who will come in and we'll group them together and we'll pair them with a coach, and that coach might like spend very little time on front-end because they do that in their day job, and then might go really deep into like active record and designing databases and data models and various things like that because they know that based off of the experience of those students. And it's neat that we can do that without having to kind of have this large lecture kind of thing and make everyone follow the same curriculum.
One of the things, again, non-programmers ask me all the time is, what kind of licensing process you have, and how do you maintain quality over Rails Girls event from one city to another? And it's a very foreign concept for me because I feel like in the open source community, trust is at the core of everything. We are real people over here, and when you give real people the possibility to take your thing and twist and warp and change it into something, sometimes things break, but most of the time something way, way, way more awesome comes out of it than I could ever have imagined. One example is Rails Girls Summer of Code, which is a project led entirely by the Berlin team. They had the vision that there should be more women in open source and there should be more beginner women who take part in building open source stuff, and they raised the funding, they designed the curriculum, they got the coaches and the teams and everything together, and none of that would have happened if I would have wanted to micromanage things and keep a rigorous licensing process. And this brings me to the last point of this section, letting go. Here's a wonderful, wonderful quote from Matt's that goes, "The future starts now. We have the second edition of Programming Ruby, which is better than the first one. It's no longer a miracle. This time, the grown-up Ruby community helped to develop the book. I just needed to sit and watch the community working together." In the same way, I think letting go of Rails Girls was one of the hardest things for me to do. I felt that Rails Girls was such a big part of me that no one could ever run it as well as I did. And I turned out to be absolutely wrong. And the only reason Rails Girls is so successful today is because of all of the individual coaches all over the world who put so much energy and passion into it. And I learned the hard way that the best things happen when you are actually not there and you let the people go and have their wild dreams and ideas. And that's the reason why we to date have over 180 cities who've hosted Rails Girls events, ranging from Belo Horizonte to Berlin, from Tokyo to Taiwan to, I think there was an event in Cairo, there's going to be an event in Azerbaijan, and we were just going through the different events with Terence in the Rails Girls/events page, and we didn't even know where half of these cities were in the world, and that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, so now we're on to the final act. So here we're going to give some closing thoughts and go through some memories. And I think this was probably one of our favorite parts of actually building the presentation, was going through all like the old photos of like places we've been to, and like talking to the various like organizers and seeing the events and things that they've had.
Happiness has been a big topic for us, and we just wanted to bring this quote out, that I hope to see Ruby help every programmer in the world to be productive and to enjoy programming and to be happy. This is the primary purpose of Ruby language. And when I talk to people about programming communities, they think they are full of people who don't like talking to one another. And then I tell them about the Ruby community that is both happy, has magical foxes, gems, all of these unicorns, amazing happy things that happen in the world, and they can't believe that it's a real thing. But I tell them that it is. And another thing is the community effort, the people chain of thought. This is another quote. I almost feel like Ruby is one of my children, but in fact it is the result of the combined efforts of many people. Without their help, Ruby could never have become what it is. And I totally feel like this applies to Rails Girls in so many ways. I've been thinking a lot about Rails Girls as a community and how it's different from schools, for instance. Like, I went to traditional school and never learned programming through that route. One of the ways Rails Girls is different is because roles do change in Rails Girls. Sometimes the beginners are the ones who teach the coaches. They realize that, oh wow, I never thought about that before. Sometimes the beginners teach one another, and sometimes the coaches teach one another. And there is no one teacher and one student. Roles do change all the time, and people can teach one another. Another thing that makes Rails Girls different from traditional schools is that there are many different ways to participate. In traditional schools, there's usually one way of being a good student, and it's when you raise your hand and say the right thing. In Rails Girls, you can be the coach who merges pull requests. You can be the coach who raises funding for the event. You can be the coach who takes care that the catering works. You can be the person who writes this amazing guide on how to add device on a Rails app. And you can do all of these different things and be a meaningful, important part of the community. And another thing is that you can be peripheral, so like on the edge at times and then central at other times. We've had some coaches who've just poured like hundreds of hours of their time and then been hibernating for a while or more silent, and that's totally okay. And I think we need to let people be active parts of the community and then do something else for a while and maybe then come back. And that kind of fluidity and flow is I think, an important part of Rails Girls. And one of the final points is that everyone can produce, not just consume. As Terence mentioned, also the beginners can write guides and make fixes, and oftentimes they see the problems that the more experienced people writing the guides don't see. And an important part is that content is changed throughout interaction. In school, you always have this one curriculum that is like solid and doesn't change ever, and in Rails Girls event, upvotes and pull requests and comments really change the content and the way we teach things. And finally, in schools, you have a boss or the teacher, and then you have the students. In Rails Girls, leadership is seen as a resource. It's not something that I teach you, but I give you the resources to teach yourself and be a part of the community. And sometimes our attendees, they go on, they learn to program a little bit more, and they come back as coaches. And we've had this happen in many cities. So they kind of become the next leaders, and that cycle repeats a lot of the time.
So there's this quote from Matt's that I found that I think really applies to the Rails Girls community. It says, "I always admire brave people people around Ruby seem to be brave, like authors of this book. They were brave to jump into relatively unknown language like Ruby. They were brave to try new technology. They could have happily stayed with old technology, but they didn't. They built their own world using new bricks and mortar. They were adventurers, explorers, and pioneers. By their effort, we have a fruitful result, Ruby. I think this is the same for Rails girls as well. I know a lot of people are involved in Rails girls from the existing Ruby community because they want to see a more diverse Ruby community. And it takes the courage of these people to be involved and to put their time and hopefully get something back. Like when you organize an event, you have no idea like if people are actually going to show up or if people actually like sponsor and give you money. You're like, you know, you're throwing yourself on the line kind of there and taking your time to do that. In addition, for attendees, it's equally scary, right? Like this is a community you don't know or you don't understand. Like you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And it's just as important for them to take the plunge and, you know, take a chance to meet people in this community, and hopefully they find out that like, hey, like there's a bunch of really nice people here and they're super welcoming and they stay around and want to be part of this community. But I think courage is actually a huge important point to this whole Rails girls community, and for it to be successful, people have to have that courage.
And the stories that happen around Rails girls. This quote is long, but I'm just going to go with the last part. They challenge new things every day, trying to make the world a better and a bigger place. And one of the things that continuously inspires me is just the pure amount of stories I get to hear. And I saw from the Twitter wall that there's people from Sydney and people from all over the world who are here, like, they're so amazing. And then I've heard amazing stories, and let me tell just a few of them. We've heard a lot of career-changing stories. In Atlanta, 4 out of the 4 interns they've taken are Rails Girls alumni. Here in Rails Girls Taipei, you can see Rails Girls alumni be a part of the Ruby community. The interest is so huge. I heard that in Wrocław in Poland, they got 1,100 applicants for one event, and in Croatia, they got 600 applications to take part in an event. People travel a lot. In India, one event, I had attendees who had traveled all over India to take part in this event, like traveled overnight, and they were for the first time in Bangalore ever. And coaches travel too, which is really amazing, from one city to another, to just voluntarily take part in teaching things. And one of the coolest things is the people who also go to other cities and organize things. Like one of them, Vienna organizers, is now organizing an event in Azerbaijan, in Baku, and I think she's never been there before. She just feels really strongly that this needs to happen over there as well.
Yeah, it's actually pretty common that there'll be like an attendee who went to some other city and they happened just to be there and they went to the Rails Girls event. And they liked it so much that they then choose to organize a Rails Girls event in their own city. Like that's been a very common pattern that we've seen throughout Rails Girls. And even in Rails Girls DC, we got an email from the organizers about a girl who quit her existing job after attending Rails Girls to become a programmer, and because she was so inspired by the whole event. So, you know, the things and the involvement of people in this community do make a big difference in people's lives.
True that. Yay.
Yeah,
my favorite part.
So Linda says this is my biggest contribution to Rails Girls was that I go around, like at any of the Rails Girls events, I basically do a Friday hug, whether it's on Friday or not. So here's the one in Helsinki. I don't remember if this was actually on Friday. Here's one from Sofia. I just like Googled it, and if you Google Rails Girls Friday hug, you'll get like a bunch of pictures. This is one of them. I don't even know where this is.
And when you think about it, like what other community has people who just are like open and happy and welcoming like this? It's amazing.
This is the one in San Francisco, the first event that we did. And I know we have 3 minutes left, less than 3 minutes. I know today is not Friday, but I asked that if they did a Friday hug yesterday, and I was told we did not. So if we could all stand up, it'd be awesome if we could get like a Friday hug picture of this event.
Narrate this.
Narrate this. Are you taking the picture?
No, you take the picture. Okay, so Friday Hug originates from Aaron Patterson, who every Friday sends a picture of himself saying, "Hello, Ruby community, Friday hug time." And I think it's one of the most profound, human, beautiful things that a programming community can show to people. And On the count of 3, we'll all do a huge hug for the people all over the world. So 1, 2, 3, Friday hug! This looks amazing. You can't believe how awesome it is. Thank you. Wow, did we get the shot? Woo! And we've talked so much about humans and humanity, and when you look at that picture that just happened, and when you ask a beginner programmer or like person who is not that knowledgeable about the technology industry, and they ask what programming is or what internet is, they say, oh, internet is ones and zeros, or programming is ones and zeros, and internet is this technology platform. That's wrong. Programming is about humans, and internet is about humans. And can you change the slide? When like this is the Rails Girls community, all of the people who contribute and work on things, and the real humans behind this community.
So our final message to you here today is to go back, inspire, create, explore, like remember the posters that we posted before, and it's about really just like getting people, whether it's your brother, your mom, dad, your dog, and cat involved in the Ruby community, and like, or even if it's not like about programming, but like creating, inspiring, and exploring and futzing around with things, similar to like the quote Matt's had about creation, whether it's painting or programming or whatnot.
And you guys, you have the magic powers of being a programmer and thinking like a programmer of things, and you can apply this across any field in the world. And this is. We went through a lot of quotes from Matt for this presentation, and we were super excited, but this might still be my favorite. So me and Terence say to you, bye now. We will wait for you in the future. Yes, we're living in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any question for Linda and Terence? 質問がある方、ぜひ挙手お願いいたします。有哪位贵宾要询问 Linda and Terence 问题吗？可以举手，我们工作人员会把麦克风拿到你的位置上。
We'll be around here, so if you have questions, you can come and ask.
Yeah. Oh, questions.
That's fine.
I think the question, correct me if I'm wrong, was that there are other people who want to join a Rails Girls event besides just women, and like how do we address that? Is that correct? So actually, like this has been asked on the mailing list a few times, and what I tell people is that the event is catered towards women, and we're trying to help the diversity problem. But if there's space, like I actually see no problem in inviting like men and people who are generally like excited, they have the same mind, like excited and interested in learning and want to be part of that community. There's nothing wrong with having them be a part of that event. I don't think Rails Girls should be this specially exclusive event that is specifically only for women. And if that is how it's being done, that's kind of, I think, against some of the goals we're trying to do here.
Any further question?
Yes.
I think the reason why, so the question was, it's hard to explain for a beginner a lot of the complex concepts that are within Rails, and why did we choose Rails as the beginner language for a total beginner? I think one of the reasons was the magic moments that Terence talked about, because there's so much stuff that you need to understand in computer science before you get started, if you want to understand everything, like what is MVC, what is arrays, what are all of these things. So we wanted to sort of shortcut all of that and give the people both the intellectual and the almost tangible aha moment that, whoa, like I just built this and I made this and I have no idea what I did, but I still made this happen. And after they have that motivation, it's easier for them to go over again like all of the tedious and like hard to grasp problems of say arrays or hashes. But I think there is no shortcut. Eventually they'll need to like learn all of those things. So it's a good thing that you're helping them through those concepts. You have something?
Yeah, I mean, there's like nothing about like being able to, I know like at the end of the day, like when people deploy the application, be able to like point to it like with your friends and like actually show them your role, like, hey, I built this, like that's a very gratifying moment for a lot of the attendees.
In Berlin, they have something called Ruby Monsters, which is a weekly programming group they had for the Rails Goes participants. And in those like follow-up events, they start to go through the concepts in more depth and in more detail. But it's hard, and it takes time to really grasp what's happening, because there is so much that you need to understand.
Yes, in the back there. Yep.
Initial attraction as in like how to get attendees or keep them motivated, or how to get attendees? That's a good question. Like, I think a lot of the times the attendees that come to Rails Goes come because not of the promise that learn Ruby on Rails in one weekend, but like learn to create something in one weekend. And the message that we frame is around the whole act of like learning about technology, not necessarily learning about programming, and that kind of also manages their expectation level, because if people come to a workshop and they think that they're going to learn to become programmers, they are as far off as someone who comes to a weekend workshop and thinks they are going to learn French in one weekend. And yeah, like how to attract people more. I'm surprised like how much people across different cities and across different countries have similar kind of motivations and aspirations of taking part in Rails Goes. Like in cities, there's kindergarten teachers, and there's dentists, and there's like all of these different professions, but all of them have this urge to create something themselves, and that keeps them probably motivated also.
Yeah, and I think stuff that has helped us was probably just because there's been other existing events, like Linda and company have done a lot of hard work, and before even I got involved, just like having all like the posters and having it be like kind of this loud, creative thing that caters towards that audience, and having the pictures that are around and like the balloons and things that like make it seem like a fun event to be a part of. Like it's a fun experience to be part of that event over the weekend, and I think it's kind of built upon itself, so we've been kind of lucky in that respect.
And not all Rails Goes events are like 200-person events, by no means, and like bigger isn't always better. So if you host an event and there's 10 people, that's already 10 people who have like profoundly changed the view they see the world of technology, and that's a really good thing to have.
Okay, we are about to move to next session. So if you have any further questions, you can ask Linda and Terence in the break. Thank you. Again, let's thank to Linda
Thank
and
you.
Terence.